Hey guys, Mr. Skeptical asked me a great question in the comments, this one about exhaust systems. Specifically, he asked me if I thought dual exhausts were worth it from the performance perspective. Now, I did my exhaust system a number of years ago, so I don't have any real wrenching to show you on my truck today, but don't worry, my voice sounds great, so I'm just going to talk to the camera and give you my thoughts and why I did what I did. Now, before I go into details of the exhaust system that I came up with, I'm going to go a little bit into basics of an engine. Now, I'm not going into any real detail here, but at a high level, an engine operates as an air pump. It's bringing air in through the intake, it's mixing that air with a fuel charge, it's igniting it with the spark plugs. That causes a rapid expansion of gas, which then causes, your crankshaft to turn. As the piston is going up on the exhaust stroke, that piston is going to be pushing the exhausted gas out of the valves, out of your cylinder heads, and then into your exhaust system. So like this is a 3.3 liter engine, and it's a naturally aspirated engine. So that means that drawing the intake air into the engine is caused just by the vacuum created by the pistons moving in the cylinders. Much like a syringe can withdraw liquid as you pull back the plunger, and then it can inject the liquid as you push down on the plunger. Now you need to be familiar with the term, volumetric efficiency. Now if you take that 3.3 liters and divide it amongst the 6 cylinders, that would give you the theoretical 100% fill of how much air and gas charges you can actually fit in your engine. Now, of course, the amount of flow of your exhaust is going to be dependent on your engine RPM. So that's an important thing to note here, is that the amount of flow that you need in your engine is going to be dependent on the operating conditions. So that's kind of the logic behind intake and exhaust mods, right? On the intake side, if you reduce that restriction, your efficiency might only be 70%. But if you make it less restrictive with your air filter or air boxes or baffles or whatever, maybe you can get a 75% or an 80% fill on your cylinders, which would give you more air, more gas, more power. On the exhaust side, right, you have restrictions in the pipes, and those pipes are long, so that piston is trying to push the gas out, and it's using engine power off the crankshaft to just move that gas. So if you go with a freer flowing exhaust, theoretically, that would give you more power at your crankshaft that can go to your drivetrain and your wheels instead of just trying to get rid of the gas from the exhaust system. So when I was designing my exhaust system, I started from scratch thinking in my head, what is the theoretical most efficient exhaust system? And the answer I came up with is, well, no exhaust system. The most efficient that the engine and exhaust is ever going to be is going to be with that engine outside of the vehicle on a dyno stand in a lab with giant fans blowing the exhaust gases away and giant hoses coming down from the ceiling with vacuum hoses to exhaust the gas without having it contained within pipes. Well, that doesn't really help because you're not going to get any power to your vehicle if it just stays in a lab, so you got to put it in the vehicle. Okay, well the most direct routing of pipes would be to just have header tubes that go completely out the side, right through the side of the fender well, over top of the tires. But that's going to put hot exhaust gas directly on your tires, directly on your brake lines. It's going to be loud. It's not going to be legal. Okay, so you got to have a manifold that kind of collects all 6 cylinders together. You're going to have some catalytic converters in there. You're going to have a muffler to meet the expectations of most customers out there. And so that's the difference from the engineering standpoint of component development versus the component integration. The engine on a dyno stand is great, but the design engineers have to make compromises based on all of the requirements in order to make an overall vehicle that meets the target customer. Of course, that's kind of a ridiculous thing to talk about, right? Because no one's talking about an engine on a dyno stand, but that was how my brain started thinking about the problem of making an exhaust system more efficient. And I do want to bring up the concept of back pressure here, right? Back pressure is a measure of the pressure in the exhaust system, and it's a function of the different pipes that were chosen, the routing, the different restrictions, and different things that are in series of that fluid flow in the exhaust system. Now there's a common misconception out there that you want to reduce back pressure but not too much, because some vehicles need back pressure to operate, and that's not necessarily true. A good exhaust system really needs 2 things, and that's going to be low pressure, and the second one is going to be high velocity. So the common thing to do with an exhaust system to reduce pressure, right, is to make the pipes bigger. So if you have a pipe this big and you change it to that big, well, that's a lot less restrictive of a pipe. But the problem is when you have a constant volume of gases flowing through those pipes and you change the cross-sectional area that drastically, that's going to slow down the velocity of the gas in there, and that's going to leave the gas in the system longer. Additionally, you got all of those pipes that are metal running underneath your vehicle with airflow right around it, and that's going to act as a giant heat exchanger. So that hot exhaust gas is going to cool off, which is further going to contract the volume of that gas, and that's going to actually cause more restrictions. So you have restrictions from the overall pipes, but also from the velocity. You want to get the gas out of the system as soon as possible. So enough of this rambling nonsense here. Let's talk about the actual Nissan Xterra exhaust system. So it's a V6 engine, so you have two banks, 3 cylinders on each side. You're going to have these ridiculously non-good for flow exhaust manifolds that collect the 3 cylinders and combine them into one exhaust stream. Now, there are 2 different styles in the first gen Nissan Xterras. One is the Federal model, and then the other one's the California model. So the Federal model has 2 catalytic converters, 1 on each side. The California model said we want our air even cleaner, and they have 2 catalytic converters on each side, so 4 total. So the exhaust gas leaves the engine, goes through the catalytic converters and the exhaust manifold, and then they combine together. There's a nice little cross section where the passenger side goes across the vehicle, and it basically creates wide pipe, but it's more like a T intersection. It's a nice 90-degree angle, not very good for flow, but that combines into one exhaust pipe that goes into a giant muffler about the size of a trash can, has some extra bends as it goes out on the driver's side rear bumper. Right? So if you were going to do a true dual exhaust on the Nissan Xterra, you would have a header or the exhaust manifold on each side, collect the 3 cylinders together, combine that into one exhaust stream. And then you could just have parallel pipes going straight out the back. You'd have to route around transfer case or fuel tank or whatever else is in the way there. Now one of the issues is that now you have basically 2 distinct exhaust systems, and you have different amounts of pressure on each side. So one common technique is to equalize the pressure on each side so that they're both running at the same kind of efficiency. And you do that by basically tying the 2 exhaust streams together and then separating them back out. So they used to call that an H pipe, which is just 2 parallel pipes, and then it has a cross pipe there to allow the pressures to equalize close to the headers, and then you send them back through the tailpipes. Now somewhere along the way people realized that an H pipe was not very good for flow, so now they do the X pipe technique where both exhaust pipes come in, they touch, they open up so that they equalize pressure, and they split off going out to either side. So as I was doing research for the type of exhaust system that I wanted to do, that was the first conclusion that I reached, is although I like the look of 2 tailpipes coming out the sides of my rear bumper, my engine just doesn't push enough air to need that. I don't run the engine at a high enough RPM often enough to need that capacity of high airflow. And going back to the earlier concept of what is that theoretical best exhaust system, well, any extra bends that I put into the exhaust system to try and get my tailpipes coming out of the corners of the bumper or putting them in a specific location so I could get dual tailpipes, all that was doing was by definition adding unneeded restriction in the exhaust system that didn't help it function at all. I wanted to go with the straightest, most direct route of getting the exhaust gas out of the overall system. Now, since I didn't want to mess with emissions requirements at all, since I have inspection in my state, I cut the exhaust pipes off right after the last catalytic converters, and I got rid of that T intersection, and I got a straight through flowing muffler. It just seemed like to me that a lot of baffled mufflers out there are designed or engineered more so for a sound, and it's supposed to flow good enough, but I wanted something that legitimately was supposed to flow the best. And so it just logically, from what it looked like to me, without having access to any of their engineering data, the straight through design just made more sense to me, so that's why I went with the MagnaFlow. So the overall system that I did do, like I said, is I still combined both exhaust streams, but I combined them inside the MagnaFlow muffler. I did a 2 in, 1 out, so I have 2 2-inch pipes coming off of each side of the engine. They combine in the actual MagnaFlow muffler, and they combine into a single 2.5-inch pipe that leaves the muffler, and it is the most straight, direct routing of the pipes that we could manage. There's one little hump bent into it above the axle to give it room for articulation, and it just has a small turn down right behind the rear bumper without any extra bends. So I mentioned in my other video series that my MagnaFlow exhaust is actually one of my preferred mods. It's one of my favorite ones, and I would absolutely do it again. But the real question is, did I notice any performance increase after I did the exhaust work? And well, it's been several years now, so it's really hard to tell, right? Because I've got giant tires on there, I've got thousands of pounds of steel armor, so it's just sluggish and slow anyway. There's really no way for me to accurately, objectively measure. But I do think that there was a little bit to be gained by cleaning up that T-pipe intersection and having a straight through muffler and then having a more direct tailpipe with fewer bends. But of course I was specifically looking for it, and I was trying to test it right after I got all the pipes bent up and welded on. and I was trying to look for that difference. Fast forward a week later, and you just get used to it, and it's not enough to be drastically different. And I don't really think any exhaust work is going to be enough to really be drastically different. But that being said, I do believe the exhaust manifolds are going to be the highest restriction in the exhaust system. So if you did eliminate the manifolds and went to a header, that would probably make it a bit more noticeable. Catalytic converters, they're probably fairly restrictive, especially if you have 4 on your vehicle. But the EPA would frown upon removing those, so I'm not going to tell you to do that. So that's my thoughts on the Xterra exhaust system. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any other questions, or like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content of these videos.